Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for being here. My name is David Wadsworth, an account executive here at Revelwood, and joined by my colleague Haley Elliott, one of our pre-sales solutions consultants. We'll be showing you today's overview demo of adaptive planning here in a few moments. I just want to take a few minutes, give you an idea of what to expect today. Some background on Revelwood. We're a platinum business partner of Workday. And what that means is we're part of an extremely select group of partners that help you evaluate and implement adaptive planning. We have over 25 plus years of experience and are made up of a diverse team of certified and experienced consultants that bring decades of financial operations and system know-how. And we've implemented over 150 adaptive customers over the past couple of years, and this continues to grow. But not only that, we also help existing adaptive customers with model enhancements, integration, support services, and one-on-one training. And I'm aware that some of you may be here because you have an active initiative to get into a cloud FP&A solution, and some of you may just be here to learn or you're curious. Either way, we'd greatly appreciate you taking 15 minutes with us in the next few days, just to have a quick chat and see what your current challenges are, if you have any feedback, and whether there are any resources that we can follow up with. And an important thing to note about the demo today is that it's meant to just really give you a glimpse into what adaptive planning can do for the Office of Finance. It should be done in about 45 minutes. But during that time, everyone's on mute. But if you have a question, there is a Q&A button down at the bottom. Please enter it there and we'll try to get to it. And if not, we'll make sure to get back to you via email. I just want to take a moment and share a handful of logos that we've personally worked with at Revelwood here to help implement and ensure a successful onboarding of Workday Adaptive Planning. So adaptive planning is a place where you can do your modeling, reporting, and analytics all in one place. So everything that you need is in one solution, and it'll act as your central source of truth, if you will. So typically we'll be talking with finance teams, and of course we're pulling in the general ledger data, but adaptive can connect to really any data source that you need to, because at the end of the day, data is data, and you'll be able to bring all of that data together into one place to model and report on with confidence. This slide here gives you an idea of some of the areas of the business that you can model and plan using adaptive, as it's not limited to the core FP&A. You can model out really any operational area of the business you want with adaptive. And Haley will ensure to dive somewhat deeper into this on the demonstration today. However, feel free to ask in the Q&A any questions or topics you might be interested in exploring further, and we'll be sure to schedule a follow-up tailored demonstration with our capabilities. Adaptive runs on the Elastic Hypercube technology, which is a patented Workday technology and a key competitive differentiator. There's a couple types of solutions in the market: the Excel add-in solutions that have all the same problems of Excel, too many members in the dimensions, accounts, SKU, job title, employees, customers. It's going to lock up Excel. And Excel can't calculate just what it needs. It has to calculate every sheet and save it all to disk. So if your Excel is locking up now, your Excel add-ins will lock up for all the same reasons. Then you have your traditional cube databases. The image on the left here is a graphical representation of the database. Traditional cube databases have to save every intersection of every dimension. So you see all that white space, and it's all a bunch of zeros, but you must save that all to disk. So what our proprietary database does is save only the valid data intersections. It's also intelligent, so when you change something, it doesn't have to save all, rather calculates only what it needs to, and that's why it's so fast. So where one of these cube-based systems will tell you to keep the number of dimensions down, or it'll get too slow, or they'll break the database up into multiple cubes that must be batch updated and lose detail every time you move. But because of this technology, we'll have clients with 200 dimensions, hundreds of versions, and has minimal impact on performance. But the reason it's key is because it makes the solution scalable and able to have an unlimited number of dimensions, versions, and scenarios. And when your system needs more processing power, the system's intelligent and expands to give it to you. But what's equally important is that you have this power without losing ease of use and maintainability. And as you'll see in the demo today, everything is extremely intuitive with drag and drop functionality so that the end users can own the system without assistance from IT. That's why Adaptive has almost 6,000 customers globally across all industries. It's way more than any of our competitors in the FP&A solution space. And did you know that Adaptive has a 95% gross retention rate? It just speaks value to what the customers are getting out of Adaptive across all different types of industries, as you can see here, and it's growing rapidly. And our commitment to innovation and customer success is recognized by the industry. It's a product that gets the highest user ratings and delivers business agility in times of change. And you can expect the software to be easy to use, implement, and maintain the business scales. Being ranked at #1 ease of use, customer experience, and satisfaction, this should make you pretty excited to see Haley's demo now. Know she has a great agenda that she'll walk you through here, but no pressure.
Perfect. Thanks, David, for the intro. So like David mentioned, my name is Haley Elliott. I'm also on the Revelwood team, pre-sales solutions consultant, so handle a lot of our technical demonstrations. I've been working with Adaptive for 3 years, but do have actual clinical experience before that with primarily clinical psychology research. So this is definitely a field I'm very intimately familiar with. But with that, we're going to quickly kind of outline what we're going to walk through today. As David also mentioned, please feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like, and I'll try to get to as many as I can. I've also implemented Adaptive, so no question is going to be too scary. Before we do kind of talk through these different elements we're going to be looking at, I did want to draw your attention over to the left. These are just some things you want to be thinking about when we're walking through this demonstration in terms of different use cases you can apply to Adaptive outside of just kind of your standard FP&A functions. So we're thinking clinical trials, managing resources across those projects. If you have any joint ventures or partnerships, kind of leveraging Adaptive's visualization to support that type of reporting. We all obviously have cash flow that we need to track. But one thing we won't necessarily get into too much today, but we do encourage you to kind of think about exploring more, is using Adaptive to plan for supply chain. So it's not, again, just to be used for FP&A. It is a pretty broad planning, reporting, and analytics platform. But with that, we'll go ahead and dive in. So we are going to start with just some fundamentals. I'll take you through kind of how you navigate through the system and how an end user would walk through their day-to-day process. We'll chat about active dashboards and how you can use those for scenario analysis. Move into our financial statements. I am going to focus on the P&L today, but we do build a full 3 financial statement model. 4 if you want an indirect and a direct cash flow. We'll talk about workforce planning, clinical trial planning, and then we'll end on the 2 different types of reporting in Adaptive, both our ad hoc in-browser and our Office Connect plugin to Microsoft Office 365. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and pop us into Adaptive. So this is my home screen when I come into Adaptive. I say my home screen because you can customize this on an end user by end user basis. So while I like to see kind of a summary of key company metrics, just understand our cash status, that kind of thing, someone else might want to come in and be taken straight to a working screen that they're used to seeing, maybe just an expense variance report, something along those lines. And that's going to be true as we move through the entire system. Every view we see can be tailored to the information that is most relevant to whoever's in the system. So with that, let's talk basics. So there are 2 elements you're going to see on every screen in Adaptive. The first is your level structure. So levels are typically your organizational structure. So for a life sciences company, this can either be your legal entity structure or your projects themselves. That's usually a design consideration if we want projects to be a dimension or a level. But this is going to be your first line of security. So if you assign an end user to a specific department or cost center, every single dashboard, report, and sheet is going to be auto-filtered to their data set. They will not even see the other cost centers or projects in their level dropdown. So that's going to minimize risk of them viewing data they shouldn't be seeing. So think those personnel details that are a little bit more sensitive. And it's also just going to streamline the end user experience so that they don't have to hunt through 20 or 40 different templates to figure out which one they're supposed to be updating. Super flexible level structure, unlike a lot of other tools in the market. You have full control to just click and drag levels around, a plus button to add a new one if you acquire a new company or start up a new project. I had a company go public during implementation and they completely redid their structure themselves. So lots of flexibility even after we've implemented the basic structure. The other thing you're going to see on basically every screen is this version drop down. So you do get an unlimited number of versions in Adaptive. That's important so that you can spin up as many scenarios as you want and start moving into more of a rolling forecast. So most of our clients will move into a rolling 12-month, maybe a 3 to 5 year plan, and several will also start moving more into a 5 to 10 year strategic plan. So you can load in as much data as you want. It is not going to slow down the system or change your subscription cost at all. We have clients with several terabytes of data on this platform. You'll notice also that there are lock icons at the bottom of some of these versions, and that means it is a locked version. So think your board approved budgets that you don't want end users to be able to change the data, but you still want them to be able to go in and look at it or pull it into a budget versus actuals report so they can kind of be held a little bit more accountable, and you always have that original budget to hold people accountable and refer back to. So that's going to be levels and versions. Before we do start talking metrics and planning and all of that, I just want to quickly run us through navigation and integration as well, so we know where all of this data we're about to see is even coming from. So the first kind of tab here is going to be sheets. These are all of your planning models, kind of like the worksheets. A lot of you are probably using an Excel right now. We customize this based on your business. So I have a ton in here. You probably won't have this many. You can also customize this area on a user basis as well. Assumptions are going to be your global drivers. So think enrollment cost for your clinical trials, workforce assumptions for your FTEs, anything along those lines. If any of you are also currently not pre-revenue and you're actually selling your products, this will also be where you account for things like freight costs, materials, that kind of thing. So it's a nice central area to manage all of your drivers so you aren't having to hunt down everywhere you keyed in a specific number. We'll come back to reports and dashboards. I am not going into consolidations today. By consolidations, I mean intercompany eliminations, not just rolling up data, but we do have that functionality as well as a process tracker where you can create checklists for people. But where I did want to quickly pause is just an integration. So we're about to take a look at a bunch of KPIs, a bunch of models or financial statements, but the question is always going to be, where do we start? So there are a couple of different ways to get data into Adaptive, and I'm not just talking financial data. I'm talking occupancy, any operational metrics you have. We can integrate to whatever system you use to track enrollment to bring in kind of that more anonymous patient data, that kind of thing. So think a little bit broader, but Adaptive is data agnostic. So how this works is we'll connect directly to whatever source system you have for any data set you like to base your plans on. And we'll set up a task to actually load in those data sets automatically. So that can be as quickly as every 15 minutes. Most of our clients choose to have it auto load once a day, usually nighttime. So when you sign in, all of your actuals are already updated. You can also go into a task and just click a run button. So it's pretty close to real time. This is real time as you'd like it to be. And it will not kick anyone out of the system. So it's always an important question to ask when you're thinking of bringing data into a system like this, is is the integration process going to slow down the system significantly? And in Adaptive, that answer is no. It takes, like I said, maybe 2 to 3 minutes to run all of your data in. And you can even close out of the task screen if you'd like. You do not have to be actively in integration monitoring the task. It'll just run in the background. But that's kind of the automated option. If you have data sets that you don't load quite as often, so your employee roster, you just upload it once a month, you also have the option to come in and just manually import a CSV file. This is also a really nice way to start if you just want a budgeting tool stood up pretty quickly and you just want to kind of distribute a standardized template for people to fill out and then import it. This is a nice way to at least start stepping slowly into bringing someone into the tool. And so once you import, all of the data from that Excel template will show up in your working sheets. Okay. And of course, you can also just key directly into Sheets, which we'll see. The last piece here is support. All of our clients get 24/7, 365 support from Workday. That means anytime you need to pick up the phone or submit a ticket, you are going to have someone who is going to answer. That's just auto included in your subscription. And you can honestly be self-serve here as well. Just click a question mark and you have a little back pocket IT person who's going to guess exactly what you need help with and take you to a specific section of our context-dependent knowledge base. So this is meant to be fully owned by finance or any department that's in here without having to heavily rely on IT. Okay, so that's going to be our starting point. We bring data in either by manually importing or automatically kind of integrating it in, or both. So we're going to chat through what we're actually seeing on the screen here, and then I'll show a couple of more clinical-oriented dashboards as well. So dashboards in Adaptive are called active dashboards for a couple of reasons. The first is that you can click into any number that you see. So any number, any chart, any KPI, and always figure out where that data is coming from. So I click on revenue, which I know again won't be applicable to all of you. If you are pre-revenue, I will move into some clinical trial dashboards in a bit. But I'm gonna have two options here. The first is just to explore data. So this is going to open up a cell explorer that's going to tell me things like what cost centers are generating that number. Is there a dimension associated with it? Probably the two most important elements here, though, are going to be my audit trail. So Adaptive does have an automatic audit trail functionality where it'll actually track who's been making changes to the data, when they made the change, and what the change was. Really great as you bring more and more people into the system. And then I can also drill all the way back into the sheet that is generating this number. So right now, a lot of you are probably using one tool for reporting and one tool like Excel for the spreadsheets, and it's really hard to trace back where a number on your report came from. In this case, I have my modeling sheet available right here. The other option here was just a dimensional drill down. So you do have the ability to drill into any dimensions that you'd like. So you get an unlimited number of dimensions in Adaptive: projects, vendors, customers, products, anything like that. And as soon as you add a new dimension to the system, it's going to appear in this drop down. So you don't have to code this in. Adaptive is coding free. I've personally never taken a coding class and never intend to. But all you need to do to get some more information is say, cool, what products are we selling? That's going to give me one new view. I can take a look at, okay, who's buying the specific product? Now I'm looking at a customer level analysis, and so on and so forth. So you can continue drilling down as far as you'd like. And you always have that option to explore data to see where a specific data point is coming from. Okay. The other reason these are called active is that you can bring planning models directly onto these sheets as well. So just continuing a little bit with the revenue talk track. Let's say I'm planning for a specific department. So I'm on our Sales North team, something along those lines. What you're going to see down here is I actually have one of my planning models on this dashboard. And so I can start to ask the question, what happens if we actually ship let's say 15% more of a certain product than we expected to, maybe a vaccine or something along those lines. We'll make that change, save it off, and you're going to see a ... come up over every single one of these charts. And that is a live update. So you can think changing project timelines, because we all know clinical trials rarely go on the timeline we originally think they're going to. From a staffing perspective, you might realize that one of your teams is going to be understaffed for an upcoming project, and we're actually going to need to reassign them. So you'll be able to make those types of changes pretty quickly, see how the employee burden cost kind of changes, that kind of thing. So pretty nice way to actually actively get involved in different scenarios. And we'll also use dashboards a lot of times to actually help guide end users through the system. So if you think of being able to bring these sheets right next to visuals, you can start to set up your budgeting processes step-by-step tabs with each of your planning models on sequential tabs. That's going to be nice for those of us who don't necessarily get a lot from blindly keying into a spreadsheet, because as we're making those changes, all of these dials are updating, so we fully understand the impact of our changes. Last point on dashboards, and then I'll kind of move on, is just how you actually build them out. So everything in Adaptive is drag and drop. So if I just quickly come in to edit a dashboard, you'll see I have a ton of different just nice charts popping up over to the left. You can just grab one of those, drag them onto the dashboard, and you will have access to every single data point you've loaded into Adaptive. This is not just your financial GL balances, but also any sort of capital planning you've done, your project planning, trial information, anything like that. So pretty straightforward for people to be able to build out their own visualization. On the trial side of the house as well, you might choose to start building out dials for things like cash burn or R&D expenses, have scorecards to track your trends over time. You get the idea. There's a lot of flexibility, and I can start drilling in by our different patients if you want to get down to that level of detail, projects, so on and so forth. But that's going to be dashboards. I'm going to go ahead and start moving into the actual models that are generating these numbers. So we're going to start in one of our financial statements and move into workforce planning and clinical trials. So what you're going to see on the screen is one version of an income statement. Green numbers are actuals coming in from our ERP. As a reminder, like I said, we can integrate to basically anything, your NetSuites, your MIPs, SAPs, and tax. There are a ton. But green are actuals being automatically refreshed nightly. Black numbers are our budget data, and that's going to be either coming from a separate detailed sheet, keyed in directly, or calculated. When I say calculated, that is indicated by these little blue carrots in the bottom of some of these cells. And that's just saying there is a formula on this cell. You'll see the formula bar up here, and the formulas in Adaptive are pretty similar to Excel syntax. So in this case, instead of saying A2 times B 40,000, I'm actually saying, hey, we're taking our FTE account from our personnel model and multiplying that by one of my telephone per head assumptions. So you can think of this more like taking named ranges and using those in formulas to actually inform you what's happening without having to go hunting through a really long list of cells. If you want to do something more complex, because I know that's a very simple formula, you'll be able to actually come into Formula Assistant, and it's just point and click to what you'd like to put in a more complex formula. So think your if statements, things you're used to using in Excel. Talking about Excel as well, if my clicking is driving you insane, we do have pretty much the same shortcuts. So this is going to really help, again, with bringing people who are comfortable in Excel into more of a standardized system without losing that kind of navigation that they might be used to. So in terms of generating this data, the plan data, let's say you have an expense line item like training or maybe materials and you have a fixed budget for the year. You can always just come in and say, hey, we're going to increase our new hire training. And Adaptive will give you a bunch of native ways to break that back. So this is not, this doesn't need to be programmed in. This is just built-in financial intelligence to actually look at something like last year's seasonality and break that number back and how we actually think it's going to be spent. So if you're thinking on a cash or from a cash perspective, this is a really nice way to at least take a little bit more of a step into being more granular with your cash flow planning and when cash is actually going to go out. The other option here is to have supporting schedules. So for instance, we'll take a look at a personnel sheet. So this type of sheet is what would typically generate our salary and wages line item on an income statement. This is called a model sheet. Nomenclature isn't that important. It really just means a sheet with a bunch of columns. You get to pick what columns you actually want to have on these sheets. So if you see some fields here that aren't really relevant to you, that's completely fine. Or you see a couple that are missing, we can just drag new ones on. You can modify this, add fields, delete fields, even when you've been on the system for like 2 years. So in terms of what we're seeing here, you'll notice that a couple of these cells have drop downs. That just means that these are referencing an assumption sheet. So I have all of my different state taxes in a personnel assumption sheet right here. So that I don't have to track that on an individual basis. Adaptive just knows California has a specific set of taxes. Let me grab those rates. You will also notice that a few individuals have multiple lines on this sheet, Alberto, for example, and that just means this individual is being split across multiple projects. So if you do a lot of R&D, which I'm assuming most of you on this call do, you do have the option to allocate employee costs across those different projects. So this is just one way to do it by percentage. We can integrate in actual time cards if you want to get that specific, or we do have an allocations module on the platform as well that's included in your subscription that'll just take kind of the bulk salary expense and allocate it across projects by something like FTE or expense or revenue, something like that. So a bunch of different ways to think about allocations. All of the calculations here are going to happen in the back end. So if I drill into, let's say, our CFO here, we'll actually see some of the personnel calculations start. These are all configurable as well. These are just some of the out-of-the-box ones that we have around Social Security, FUTA, FICA, all of that. But the one thing I do want to call out is you'll see on the Social Security line that Grace's tax actually cuts off in September because she's hit her maximum. So that will resume at the beginning of the next fiscal year, which, side note, if you're not on a January through December fiscal year, no worries. We just set it to whatever your fiscal year is. But Adaptive actually recognized the maximum and minimum for that tax and is going to auto handle kind of reducing or prorating whatever that final period should be, and then restarting the next fiscal year. So think getting more, again, granular with your planning, whether it's in personnel or any other part of your planning process. Last thing here is just once you've imported your roster, if you want to make changes, you absolutely can. You don't just import data into Adaptive and then it's kind of static. I can come in and say, cool, you know what, we're going to hire another manager, or I want to know what would happen if we hire another manager. I'll just copy that row and just put in a new hire. Okay, you can change the date if you want to, and as soon as I save this change, it's going to flow through to my P&L. So everything is connected in Adaptive. I do not have to look at my P&L and be concerned if I'm looking at the most up-to-date data. So just kind of, that's a little bit on interactivity. I could have copy and pasted from an Excel file into here too. Lots of flexibility with how you interact with these sheets. that's going to be all we're going to cover on personnel for right now, unless there are questions. The other type of modeling I did want to cover was more on the clinical trial side of the house. So yes, we have people, but we need to know when these projects are actually happening. So this is another model sheet, as you can tell, completely different fields. And I've split each of my trials into their different phases. So if I come into any of these projects, if it's been approved, I can actually come in, row details. I'll go ahead and come over. And you're going to see two different sets of calculations. So this is important. We have the even spread one. So it's a 6-month trial or 6-month part of this trial. So it's going to even spread. But we also have an assumption sheet that's saying, since this is a actually 5-month trial, we have a specific schedule we're expecting to burn that cash. So 50% in the first month, 10, 10, 10, 20. This is going to be important because we all know it's extremely rare to see cash actually go out evenly over the life of a trial. And if you're working on something that's multi-year, I know mine was 2.5 years, it can be kind of a big deal if you're spending 50% of your budget up front, but you're planning to even spread it. So just think, again, we'll have some sort of supporting schedule that just says, hey, 5 months, based on historical trend, this is how I think the cash is actually going to go out. Okay, and that's what would be ultimately linked into your financial statements. Same interactivity here. If you want to see what would happen if you added a new trial, just go ahead and add it on. You probably have this on some sort of dashboard. We will also typically have an assumption sheet around something like enrollment costs. So when you think different patients are going to enroll, you obviously aren't going to start a trial with all 600 people you expect to enroll. So we can have a similar seasonality schedule that I showed when I broke back that new training number on the P&L to also break back whatever your actual target is for the enrollment period based on when we think they're actually going to enroll. So lots of seasonality, lots of patterns, instead of just evenly spreading everything, because that's what Excel does. One other thing that I'm not necessarily going to cover today, but you just might want to think about that we've shown in the past, is just being able to track things like occupancy or machine capacity. If you use CT machines or something like that, MRIs, anything along those lines, we can start to bring in that type of operational data. So you know if you have enough square footage on your sites to actually handle all of the trials you're trying to manage, and if you have the number of machines, equipment, hardware, people to actually handle all of those patients as well. So just another use case. And then all of those expenses will usually culminate in a sheet like this as well, a cube sheet where I can say, hey, I just want to see all of my total project expenses by project. I'll drag that down. And it's basically a nice little pivot table that'll go ahead and break that account down by project. So cube sheets are usually going to be summary sheets. You can load actuals into these. Just a nice way to visually close off the planning process. Okay. With that, I am going to go ahead and cover a couple of different types of reports as well, and then we can open for questions. So we are going to start in web reports. So let me go ahead and open up a couple of these. Web reports are going to be used for kind of ad hoc reporting. So you're at the end of your budget process, or you're doing a reforecast and you want to see how you're tracking against actuals real quick. You can usually build one of these out in a couple of minutes. A lot of people will also put this as a last step in a process, so that as people are going through their kind of budget checklist, this is a last step where if they see a highlight, they have to come in and add a note as to why there's a variance there. So very collaborative. There are a lot of opportunities to add comments as you move through the system. All of those comments, whether they were made on a sheet or directly on the report, will aggregate, usually at the bottom, but you can set this to be in the columns over here as well. So like I said, it's just a nice way to enhance collaboration. If any of you are multi-currency as well, Adaptive does have native FX capabilities. So we'll just load in your exchange rate table, usually from your ERP, and the level structure will automatically handle the translation, but you will be able to, let's say, run this report in CAD if you wanted to, or anything along those lines. So what I showed earlier as well, drilling down on a dashboard, you can do pretty much that same thing on a report like this. So if I come into this kind of wild variant, 1700%, we're definitely not okay with that. I'm going to come into actuals and see what on earth happened. I'm not going to have to go back into my ERP. I'm not going to have to ping accounting and wait for them to be able to get back to me. I'm going to just drill directly into transactions in Adaptive. And I have that level of detail available right here. It's being integrated in, automatically refreshed. I can add whatever level of detail I want. So vendors, invoice ID, what projects these expenses are assigned to, why are we traveling for these projects? Anything along those lines can be added to this table, and it will be restricted by level. So you don't have to worry about people seeing transactional detail that they shouldn't. The other option here is to pivot the entire report by dimension. So like I said, I have a lot in here just because this is multi-purpose instance. Probably won't have this many dimensions, but for example, if I want to look at salary and wages by function, I have an attribute on my levels. And so I'm looking at salary and wages by S&M, R&D, G&A, and a couple cost of sales departments. If I wanted to download this to Excel and PDF, I could, but you also get up to 1,000 view-only users with your license, which is, or with your subscription. So those people can just come directly into the system, drill down. You don't have to worry about security or anything like that. Adaptive just handles all of that for you. The last piece on web reports is just going to be how they're built, and surprise, surprise, it's drag and drop. You have all of your elements from Adaptive right over here. So if I wanted to take my, let's say a metric account, something like that, we'll put EBITDA on here. I can just drag that over. So again, I'm not restricted to just putting my GL data on here. It would probably take me a couple minutes tops to spin up this report. And after a couple hours of training, you're going to be just as fast. If you want to add any conditional formatting as well, that's not coding either. It's a plus button, and you just tell Adaptive what the criteria is. So it's pretty easy to set up those visual indicators. Just for those of you who are in, especially the C-suite on this call, this report should be very interesting to you, where I've stacked my income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow on top of each other. I have two different versions of my budget next to last year's actuals. And at the bottom, just to highlight that I don't just have GL balances on here. I have a bunch of kind of financial metrics that are probably relevant to y'all: cash ratio, current ratio, debt ratio, that kind of thing. So that's going to be how ad hoc reporting works in Adaptive. The other type of reporting that we have, and this will be the last thing I cover today before passing it back to David, is going to be Office Connect. So like I mentioned, this is going to connect Adaptive and all of the data you have there. So your actuals, your plan data, all of those versions into Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. So those board decks that I'm sure we all love making, this is going to make that process of building out those decks take you a couple of minutes max instead of hours or days. So let's go ahead and talk functionality here as well. If I highlight linked cells, you'll actually see blue cells and green cells. Blue cells are linked directly to Adaptive, so you can always come in, explore cell, and if you have permission to do so, it'll go ahead and open up that cell explorer for you, so you can again get from your board report during a board presentation and immediately answer the question of why a certain expense is so high. Green cells will automatically update as I roll this report forward, anything along those lines. So we do not have to worry about keeping that up to date. Now, if you want to build one of these out, you don't have to scrap what you already have. We have the same elements from Adaptive over on the left here. So all I need to do is, or all we need to do is just take your existing report, like I have on the screen, click, drag, and those are all now going to be connected to Adaptive. The only other thing that we need to do here is come into workbook properties. We're going to roll this forward a month for our June report. On report date, roll it forward a month. And we're doing all of those hours of work in about 15 seconds here. So you should be able to see that this is now updated. If I actually pick May, sorry about that. There you go. Cool. So we now have a new trailing 6 months. So typically you'll have actuals in. You did not have to manually update those trailing 6 months, trailing 12. All of our Excel formatting is also still retained. If you would like to be able to add comments, people can come in and add comments without having to worry about this being overwritten. And then you can also always expand out for more detail. Last point here, if you wanted to generate this type of report for your different sites or your different departments, you can just come into repeating reports up here. I'm going to go ahead and tell Adaptive, hey, I want to break this down by level. Which levels I want to break that down by. I'm going to pick 3 of my cost centers in this case. And we're going to see at the bottom there now 3 new tabs. Adaptive is splicing out all of that data for me. So I now have sales east, south, north, as well as my total company still. So this is probably one of the most popular features we have, just because, again, it's pretty painful to try to build something like this just with Excel. And as I mentioned, this does also work for PowerPoint and Word as well. Cool. So that's all I have for today. With that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to David to close us out.
Awesome. Thanks, Haley. So hopefully everyone saw how powerful, flexible, and especially how easy Adaptive is to use with the simple drag and drop functionality. If you need more, we have plenty of resources we can make available to you, such as a one-on-one demonstration that speaks more to your specific needs. We can offer up ROI sessions to quantify the value of this investment, hands-on workshops, and even get your hands on a trial too. Just let us know what makes sense for you when we connect in a follow-up meeting, or reach out to me directly. We're happy to help. And we encourage you to learn more about Revelwood and our implementation approach by visiting our website at revelwood.com. And while you're there, just encourage you to visit our Knowledge Center, where we offer tips and tricks about all the aspects of the planning process, technical tips on the tools, planning tips about the budgeting process, and various tips on other business aspects of your FP&A model. And thanks again for attending. And as mentioned earlier, one of my colleagues will be reaching out for a 15-minute follow-up. Hopefully you can take the time just to share your feedback and let us know how else we can help. Thanks, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your day.